Welcome our sneak peek program, which is our education department puts this together when we have a new exhibit opening to the public. Typically it's a day before that it officially opens, so you might notice the lighting might not be quite finished and there might be a few things still happening, but for the most part we are ready with this exhibit. We find that our guests enjoy a chance to hear from an expert before it really opens to the public. My name is Jane Lavino. I am the Sugden Chief Curator of Education here at the museum. And the title of this exhibit, I want to make sure I say it correctly, is, where did it go? Unnatural Selections, Wildlife in Contemporary Art. And just by looking around, I'm sure you've already got that sense, especially compared to what you saw earlier in the first galleries that you encountered when you came in here. I already mentioned that. Oh, I want to thank our generous sponsors. We are grateful to Art Bridges, the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, Maggie and Dick Scarlett Endowment in honor of Jaffa and Bill Kerr, Mays Family Foundation, Thomas and Elizabeth Granger Family Charitable Fund, Anne and Michael Moran, and Long Reimer Winiger. So a nice long list of sponsors. This is a huge exhibit. It's one of our two major summer exhibitions. Before I forget, if you're around 2 weeks from today, we will open another exhibit in the King Gallery, which is that hallway that kind of heads down to the left outside that door. So I'll mention that at the end, just so you don't forget it. But as I said, the exhibit covers two major galleries, the one we are in and the one right behind this partition. Our curatorial staff has done an amazing job with some very challenging pieces, video, huge paintings, drawings, huge sculptures, you will see. And some of them were never framed before. A lot of them are fairly recent acquisitions to this collection. Some of you, if you are connected with Collector's Circle or Blacktail Gala, thank you, because your involvement has helped acquire these pieces in recent years. Our special guest today is Dr. Tammy Hanniwalt. Tammy is our curator of art, and she is going to give us an overview of how this idea came together, how the exhibit was conceived over quite a number of years now in the making of this exhibition, how the art was acquired, which I've alluded to already. It's all part of our permanent collection, and how the exhibit is organized into 4 thematic sections, which I'll let you talk about, Tammy. Before I forget, as always, following the sneak peek program, which will last approximately 30 minutes, attendees are welcome to have lunch in the Palette restaurant out here, and they offer a 10% discount if you identify yourself as a program attendee. So you can say, I attended the sneak peek program, and then they will be. So welcome, and thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Jane, so much. Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to see so many people here. I'm really excited about this exhibit. I have been involved with this exhibit for the past 3 years. When I first came here, I began as an associate curator, and later took over as the head curator. Continuing with this exhibit has always been at the forefront of my process. My research has been in contemporary modernism and contemporary art, so it's really exciting. If you've gone through the galleries, you can see that we have a great historic collection of wildlife art. And wildlife art has sort of not a stigma, but sort of a feeling about it that was influenced heavily by Charles Darwin, hence the name of this exhibit, Unnatural Selections. A little bit of play on that, and you can see in the labels, I kind of have done a call to that with the parchment and the different illustrations that were sort of a nod to Charles Darwin on that kind of thing. But this is art that I'm really excited about, because this is art that's been collected the associate curator and the curator, Bronwyn Minton and Adam Harris, began collecting these kind of works about 15 years ago. And I have been privileged to take over this exhibition that was started by Bronwyn Minton and make it into something even more. I was able to help get some acquisitions of definitely some of the native artists, like the one you see in the corner, Star Hardridge. Gentleman's kind of standing in front of that now, sorry. But he's Muskogee Creek and from Oklahoma, where I did attend OSU or OU to get my PhD. As Jane mentioned, the exhibit, when I got here and I had to take over this exhibit, I wanted to decide how I wanted to tell a story about how contemporary art is changing what we think about art. And I had to think about what the artists were doing, and what came to me, and what probably isn't a new thing, is that artists were addressing issues with wildlife that pertained more to humanity than it did maybe to wildlife. But there is an idea, and this is spread throughout now, that we have to learn how to live with wildlife in what is known now as the Anthropocene. That's a word that's been going around in academia for quite a while now. But that's this sixth epoch of extinction. This means that our world is changing, and it's changing largely due to human influence. So I picked 4 different topics. Aesthetics is one. I picked tradition and science and
Politics.
Politics. Thank you, because I always forget one. So aesthetics, I have a short definition there. Wildlife as art and entertainment. So a lot of the times we have animals are our entertainment. You can see in Leslie Thornton's piece there, which was a piece that was originally shown in Times Square on those big billboard-like signs that they have in Times Square. Leslie Thornton is best known for Fred's Adventures in Hell, was a movie that she did about children being raised by a television in the apocalypse. But this one is, she's taken wildlife, and on one side you see the wild animal. Which one is up? Is that the snake? Yeah. So there's a snake on one side, and you see that the designs that are on the snake's body are in the other kaleidoscopic vision on the right-hand side, and that changes when the animal changes. So every time the animal moves, that kaleidoscope changes, like if you're looking through binocular in this case, but like one of those kaleidoscope visions that you change. A lot of the other pieces you can see are made of different materials. So you don't think that maybe rebar is the typical aesthetic pieces for a sculpture. But it turns out that this one looks pretty nice. It's a red fox that the gallery nicknamed Barney. But I can show you the rest of the exhibit. If we come in here, we're just about finished with this one. We go into this section that's on tradition. There's a misconception with that word. It's a little tricky because tradition is automatically, people think that tradition is just about old ways of doing things or old things. But tradition changes. Tradition is constantly morphing. And this is how we transmit our stories, our histories. I like to point to Preston Singletary's Raven in this section because Raven, he's Tlingit, Preston Singletary, maybe some of you have heard of him. But he's a glass artist, and he began working in glass in the 80s, and he didn't start including Tlingit references in his art until the 1990s. But in this one you can see White Raven, the story of Raven, and there's a little bit of it on that label over there. I'm not pointing you out, I'm sorry. It's just kind of crowded in here. But on that label over there, it tells the story of Raven. Raven stole the sun in the Tlingit story. The raven stole the sun and he gave it to the people. Raven was a white raven in the beginning, but the chief or the god that had the sun in its possession that the raven stole away held Raven over a pitch fire long enough until his feathers turned black. So that is why the raven is black. Raven is also a trickster. And a trickster in Native American art stories, or in Native American art and in Native American stories, tell about what it is to be human. So tricksters do things that are beneficial to humans, but they also can be buffoonish, and they can do stupid things like humans can do. And they show you what happens if you go too far. And they are lessons to be learned. So we also have this incredible Tapestry by Kiki Smith. I don't know how many of you have heard of Kiki Smith, but I have been a fan for a long time. She is one of the most prominent feminist artists, and she's been working since the 1970s. She references European folk tales. She references in this piece Japanese printmaking traditions, and it's made on a jacquard loom at a place, gosh, I can't remember where the print studio is, but that helped her work this piece into the piece that you see now. If you look closely at it, there is some really interesting textures that they've changed on the loom, so it tells part of the story. If you notice too, in both of these and the Peter Jericharris' piece over here, Caravan, there are orbs. So maybe some of you have heard about orbs in photography, where they take their spirits that maybe pick up in the photography. And so that's sort of what both of the artists, I think, here are referencing. There's sort of a mystical quality to both of these. And they're telling two different stories. Actually, this one is called Caravan by Peter Jericharris, because he's a jazz musician, and also an artist and a jazz musician. And he listens to this is from Duke Ellington's Caravan, the tune from earlier in the 20th century. But it's actually referencing also to Peter Jericharris, a shamanistic vision. So if we go over here, as everybody can see this horse, this is also telling a different kind of story. This is Pegasus, and it is by the artist Paul Valinsky. Paul Valinsky is in our Western Vision show every year, and he does a lot of butterflies. I think this one is more significant though, Pegasus, meaning this horse that can fly, and that took the hero, I believe it was Bellerophon, and carried him off into battle so that he won the battle against the enemy. Paul Valinsky has told us that he was an alcoholic. The butterflies are made of aluminum cans, specifically beer cans. So he's a recovering alcoholic, and the idea that this horse is carrying the hero to victory really resonates on a personal level to the artist. Also back here, we get into politics. So I have Julie Buffalohead here, another one about tricksters. She's Ponca, lives in Minneapolis, and her father started the Native Arts Studies program at the University of Minnesota. So her father and her mother's an anthropologist, they both had a lot of information about different tribal traditions and storytellings. There's the trickster Nanaboju, the rabbit in this one, and you can see that the ships are referring to colonization. And the deer on the one side, Julie is deer clan, and the deer represents her. She's an observer, and in this story, this creates another world, sort of political and storytelling at the same time, but that we have a world where the tricksters, the animals, have taken over. So this is giving them the power this time, taking it away from the colonizers and the Portuguese ships. Walton Ford is a very well-known artist. These are 6 of his prints that we have in our permanent collection, and we're very excited that we could get all of these out. A lot of Walton Ford's prints deal with colonization and violence, and a lot of interesting stories. You see the turkey over here. That's kind of referencing Benjamin Franklin's idea that the turkey should have been the national emblem of the United States, not the eagle, for as far as birds. And the turkey is smashing a Carolina parakeet. And if you look at the next image by Penelope Gottlieb, there's a Carolina parakeet. They went extinct in this country in, I believe it was 1918. And an interesting story, because these birds used to blacken the skies. There were so many of them. But they died out a lot because of their loss of habitat. Some say it was because the feathers were used for women's hats, but that didn't have a whole lot to do with it. It was more that they were ruining habitats and they eat cockleburs. Penelope Gottlieb is very interesting because she takes old Audubon prints, so a nod to history, and she was really interested in invasive plants. And she wants to complete a whole set of birds that have become extinct. And she is, as you can see, the plants are wrapping around these Audubon birds and choking the life out of them. So there's a pretty strong message there, and a pretty strong message in Walton Ford's work too. So we covered tradition and aesthetics and politics. And back here, we have some science. And I wanted to take you all back to see this really large Buruji, this ink drawing by George Buruji. So this is all done in ink. He paints with a very small brush. I think this is the biggest painting kind of artwork that we have in the museum. Bigger than the historic Joseph Wolf. And generally we have a large Tucker Smith painting of the elk refuge, but this is even bigger than that. And we just framed this yesterday and got it on the wall today. And that was a feat in itself. There was a lot of issues with framing and all kinds of stuff, but I think this is an amazing artwork. The reason I put it sort of in the science place is because of the story of the condor, the California condor. The name of this piece is California. This is a California condor sitting on the back of a whale. California condors can have a wingspan of up to 12 feet, almost as long as the painting that's up right now. Buruji paints the condor in a very regal kind of way. It looks almost to me like there's a cape. Maybe the wattle's the jewel of this very regal bird that has a very stately pose. Sitting on the back of this gray whale, we don't know if the whale's dead or not. Could be dead or alive. The great thing about these birds is that they are the undertakers, or sometimes referred to as the undertakers in nature, because they clean up the diseased flesh and that kind of thing. They're carrion eaters. So they're necessary. In the 1970s into the 1980s, these birds were becoming extinct, and they were doomed to become extinct. But some people captured a few, had a breeding program started, and then released them back into the wild. So essentially, humans allowed this species to live. All of these birds are tagged today, and if you see right here, that's where their tag would be. And George Buruji has said that this one is sort of set free from that. So he wants to show all the imperfections. This here, the birds pee on their feet to cool off. So the whale has the barnacles, there's lice on the whale. This is the reality, but I think he does a good job of showing that there is some stately beauty no matter how you see it. In fact, this piece, there is a little story behind our acquisition of it, because at Collector's Circle, where it was purchased, a lot of the members said, this is an ugly subject matter. Why would we want this in our collection? And one of the members stood up and said, I think it's amazing and it's beautiful. This is an important message. So we're really proud to show this piece. We have other videos in our in this exhibit. This one is by Dennis Helinsky. And interestingly, this one, he's filming starlings, and he figured out that when he stacked his film, he's also been working as a professor at RISD, and since the 1970s, he's a professor emeritus now. But he found that when he stacked the film, you could see the line and trace how the starlings fly. And he said when he first posted some of these videos, these early videos that he made, he got a lot of comments from skateboarders and dancers, because they wanted to watch and learn about movement. And I was thinking of the skateboarders and the going back and forth, and kind of like surfing too. So I thought that was really interesting that he got that response from them. And then the scientists started contacting him and said, we've never figured out a way to really watch how these birds learn to fly, how they teach other starlings how to fly. So this is an amazing process. How do you do it? So he's had work with scientists too on how to study these bird patterns and just different migrations. These birds are located near to where he lives in Providence, Rhode Island. And he said he noticed them one day all lined up, and he said at twilight they gather about 30 to 40,000. And he said that they do these big potato chip waves, that's his word. And it was amazing to watch. So this is kind of mesmerizing. There's another piece that's actually on display at the Art Center in town that shows what he's doing now with ravens and other birds, watching their flight patterns. So he's continuing to work on this kind of thing. Right behind you, there, sorry, thank you, is, I blanked out on her name, not Wendy, but Ruth Marshall's tiger cub. Ruth Marshall, sad, did you say, Bobby?
I know.
I know. So when you look at this, you might think it's a real tiger cub skin. There is a message with it. It's knitted. And the artist went and spent time in the Natural History Museum to get the pattern precisely what it was on a tiger cub skin. And she's done a lot of tigers since. She also told me she had to get away from this kind of work because, as you can imagine, it is a sad topic. She based this sort of on a book she was reading about wildlife, where a scientist had been tracking a jaguar in some country. I can't remember what it was, but he lost the trail of the jaguar. He went back to the village where his base camp was, and he found that the jaguar had been caught and skinned, and the hide was being tanned. So this is bringing to the attention that this happened, and this is something we can't forget about. And she was overwhelmed, she told me, when she went into the Natural History Museum with the amount of pelts that are in there, that have been turned in. But she's doing community projects now and doing murals and things like that. But it is very interesting because it's knitted. We still can appreciate it for its aesthetic value too. So that is kind of an overview, a brief overview, a quick overview of all the amazing pieces that we have in the collection. So there's a lot of stories that are told here. We have a lot of good stories to tell here. Also, when you go out, you'll see 6 colorful penguins out there, made by William Sweetlove, that are part of the exhibition. And those are made out of recycled plastic. Also, they have little bottles on their backs, the penguins, which would imagine a world that we run out of fresh water and our penguins have to carry their water bottles on their backs. Also in that studio across there, we have Animal Land. Animal Land was created specifically for the museum. We commissioned 2 artists, Lauren Strohacker and Kendra Sollers, to make the animals you'll see there in sort of a negative, meaning the animals are white, so they're black and white, but you have to really experience it. And they filmed that here on the Elk Refuge, and at West Yellowstone they filmed the bear and the wolf, so they filmed the elk that's in there, and the bear and the wolf up at West Yellowstone at the rescue center there. So that is very specific to the museum, and that is very specific to our area. But I hope you enjoy all of that. Did anybody have any questions?
Tammy, could you
Yes.
talk a little bit, are these John Buck?
Oh yeah, John Bucks. Yeah, a more local artist, married to Deborah Butterfield. I don't know if any of you know, she does horses a lot out of driftwood kind of things, or other materials, but she's a pretty famous artist, he's a pretty famous artist. These are very interesting because he's addressing so many different things. You gotta look really close at these. So here you can see we have Old Faithful on the preserve. And in there we've got some bison etched into the print. We've got this grizzly. Actually, this is a reference to a grizzly that terrorized some ranchers in Utah back in the early, Old Ephraim was his name. Yeah, and he terrorized some ranchers in Utah, and his head, I think, his skull head, after they captured him, is at the University of BYU or something like that. I can't remember. But yeah, so there's lots of other references to elk. He references Old Ephraim in a lot of his work. So a lot of things that we can look at that are in our histories. There's a whole bunch of weird stuff that only John Buck knows what they mean. But this is a woodpecker that is said to be extinct, but people still say they see it. It's in the
ivory-billed?
The ivory-billed woodpecker, right? And it's sort of like Bigfoot. People say they see it, but then nobody can get a picture of it, and
It hasn't been proven one way or the other.
right. So yeah, that's really interesting too. The myths that we create, or the not myths.
And I
Maybe
love
there is
that
Bigfoot
it's a
and
woodpecker, and these
Yeah.
are wood block prints.
Yep, a woodpecker destroying the wood, or knocking on the wood, yeah. And the Statue of Liberty's in there, why? It's very funny, some of the stuff he does has a lot of humor in it too, so, and that it's all in a jar, and that we've captured it in a jar.
Any other questions? While we have
A lot of
Tammy here with us.
information, fast.
So Tammy, thank you so much. This has been a great sneak peek to see this exhibit. We really appreciate it.